Anyone know what that is? That's music to my ears. That's another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify makes it simple to sell to anyone from anywhere. Whether you're selling shirts or sandals, start selling with Shopify and join the platform simplifying commerce for millions of businesses worldwide. With Shopify, you'll customize your online store to your brand, discover new customers, and build relationships that will keep them coming back. Shopify covers all the sales channels to successfully grow your business, from an in-person POS system to an all-in-one e-commerce platform, even across social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And thanks to 24/7 support and free on-demand business courses, Shopify is here to help you succeed every step of the way. It's how every minute new sellers around the world make their first sale with Shopify. And you can do it too. I love how Shopify makes it simple for anyone to sell their products anywhere. Whether they're ebooks or earrings, Shopify simplifies starting and running your own successful business. When you're ready to take your idea to the world, do it with Shopify, the commerce platform powering millions of businesses down the street and around the globe. Now it's your turn to try Shopify for free and start selling anywhere. So sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/C-Suite, all lowercase on C-Suite. Go to shopify.com/C-Suite, all lowercase on C-Suite to start selling online today. Shopify.com/C-Suite.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute delight to be joined by the fabulous Charlie Leichtweis, who is an author, he's a speaker, he is passionate about helping people understand the how. And that's really the driver behind his business, which is Experts in How LLC, where he really helps family-owned businesses understand the how and then make it work for them. So Charlie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kim. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's such a joy. I know every time we chat, it just feels like yesterday. So I'm really looking forward to today. Yeah. And I know that you've got such insight to share with our audience. So can you start by telling us a little bit about you and your journey, please?
Sure. My journey is rooted into helping people not make the same mistakes that I might have made, quite frankly. I have a history of obviously making mistakes like everyone, and also some successes. And my joy today is to be able to help share those experiences with people to hopefully help their journey be better. So getting up in the morning, I love helping people.
I love that. And you're right, aren't you? As we travel through life, we do get things wrong. We do find the odd pothole to tumble into, but it's what we learn in those, isn't it, that allows us to really grow. And I love that you're actually taking those experiences and sharing them with other people so that they can learn the lesson without actually having to get in that pothole themselves. Right. So what got you started?
Well, in terms of getting started, I obviously came out of school, was interested in getting a broad experience with respect to business. I joined a public accounting firm at the time, Deloitte, in the United States. That allowed me to see a variety of different clients and their processes, issues, etc., both on the auditing side and the consulting side. And it got me interested in how businesses run and how to make a contribution. I left Deloitte and went into industry at the very large corporation, Abbott Laboratories, and again was able to, within various divisions, learn more about how the business process worked and how, more importantly, to engage people in that process. It's not about just telling them what to do, but it's helping them with how to do it. So that's really how it got me started. And I've expanded that through a career that's taken me, fortunately, through a number of different companies, a number of different successes, and to the point of where once I left industry, I thought, well, I would share that with people and began a consulting practice, which has evolved into Experts in How.
I love that. And you make such a valid point in there that it's about taking the people on the journey as well, isn't it? It's getting the people to understand what it is you want them to do, how you want them to do it, and why that's important. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you approach that with businesses?
Yeah, it starts with what I've learned to be my version of leadership. Leadership is an equal emphasis on results and relationships, and it's not 50-50, it's 100% and 100%. I'm an analytical person, as people will probably be able to tell throughout this broadcast. But so when people are talking to me about an issue, in my mind, I'm already thinking about where do I go with that, or where they're going with it, and how do I solve it. And so as a result, I'm thinking about the result side of it and not the relationship side of it. So as I'm sitting there in my mind thinking, I know where they're going, I know what the solution is going to be, and they're looking at me like, dude, you're not listening. And in fact, I was not listening, even though that was my intent. So having to learn the relationship side, the focus on relationship, was the key to make me more successful in leadership. And as a result, to achieve results that, quite frankly, we weren't sure we could at the beginning of the processes.
I love that. And you're right, aren't you? Sometimes we don't listen to understand. We listen to interject. We listen because we know what the answer is going to be, and we want to tell them and help them get there. But actually, the power of really listening to understand and identify that there may be something else at play that perhaps we haven't considered can be a real key to success, can't it?
It certainly can. And I wrote a book called The Power of Respect in Business. And in there is a number of stories, both mine and other CEOs that I interviewed. But to the point you just made, one of the stories is about a friend of mine, now I guess nearly 30 years. John was somebody, he could walk into a room of 30 people who he vehemently disagreed with. And after an hour, come out and people were asking, when is he coming back so we can talk to him? And I thought, that is unbelievable, amazing how he could relate to people, even if he knew he disagreed with their point of view. So I asked John, I said, John, you're amazing at it. You're a smart guy, but I'm a smart guy. How come I can't do that? And he says, I'll give you 2 words. He said, listen longer. Now, first of all, it's 2 words, so it's easier for me to remember. And second of all, you find out several things. First of all, you now are engaged in listening, and the person that's talking to you will realize that. And the second major point of that is, you may find when they get done explaining what their problem is or what their issue is, it may actually be different than what you thought it was originally. And so 20 some years ago, when he told me that, that's really, I can't do it all the time, but I try to do it as much as possible. And it's made me a better leader and a better manager. And I marry that concept with a concept of my own that says, if you're right now, you'll be right later. So you can afford to wait to try to listen to it, even if it's difficult. And that's my recommendation. It's helped me in something like that, some trigger that each individual could develop, I think would be helpful to them.
I love that. It's right, isn't it? The longer we listen, the more chance we've got of learning something. And I've literally just finished reading John Cleese's book, The Little Book of Creativity. And in that, when he was doing a study of people, what he identified was that those that were the most creative, that stayed the most in their creative brain, were the ones that didn't answer the question until it had to be answered. So they weren't the ones that rushed to answer it. They were the ones that got comfortable with the uncertainty of just allowing themselves to the last minute it needed to be done in case something new came in, a better idea, a new way of thinking that allowed them to propel past what they'd originally thought. And it sounds like, with what you're doing on that listening longer, and I love your other point, if you're right now, you'll be right later. I think sometimes we rush to be right, don't we? To go, yeah, I've got this, I'm here, I'm okay. When actually, it's okay to let people come on that journey and and feel like they understood where the answer came from, instead of almost being uncomfortable with it because they don't understand where it came from. And I guess if you've got quite an analytical brain, you can perhaps see patterns that other people haven't seen yet, and that can be, that's great. It's great for businesses, but I imagine can be challenging for getting people to come on that journey if they don't really see the stepping stones. Would that be fair?
No, absolutely fair, Kim. And another story in the book related to that was a gentleman I worked for when I was the chief operating officer for a company here in North America. And he was the CEO. And he told me one day, he was talking about marketing, and he was talking about product development and marketing, innovation sort of things. And he brought the marketing team together, and he said, Charlie, he says, you can bring them together. And he says, I could probably stand up there and tell them in an hour or less all the things that they need to do and consider and lay out an outline for them. He said, but on the other hand, I could let it go for 2 or 3 or 4 hours and let them work through the understanding and ask questions and be engaged. And he said, Charlie, always take the 4 hours. And, again, insights that of things you can actually do that you may not be apparent to you, but it helps you relate to other people and engage them in a way that actually means they're learning as well. And even if you have something to teach them, they'll learn it. But the other side of it is you'll learn as well.
Yeah, I love that. Such great advice. And you're right, aren't you? We sometimes rush to kind of give people the answer because it's going to be faster. But in the long run, it often isn't faster because you've got to keep giving them the answer because you've not helped them to learn how to get the answer for themselves. So I guess in what you're doing, by spending the time to engage them, getting them involved in the process, they're developing their learning processes as well, aren't they? And their thinking processes, as well as teaching you so that you all continue to grow, which I think is amazing. Is there something that you see that is almost commonplace amongst the businesses that you go in and help, where you see that this is one thing that seems to always be a challenge for them?
Well, it's hard to say because there's a lot of different circumstances in different businesses. As I think about it, one of the overriding difficulties, and it's not just business, I think it's just for us as human beings, is communication. And when you think about it, in a small business where everybody's in one place, it's probably less difficult than it is when you think of an organization with multiple locations and in multiple, perhaps even time zones for that matter, in terms of communicating and creating a message that's clear to everybody that they can understand and get on board with. So it's the effort has to be on making sure the communications are concise and clear enough and timely to all aspects of your organization. When I go in to help organizations, sometimes I've found that we get people together. So first of all, the helping organization with the how process is something like this, where you first start with what are the objectives of the business, which is management's responsibility to identify, and then to try to determine what mission critical processes affect or are affected by those objectives. So you then go to the next level of who are all the people front to back in those processes you need to engage with that objective and bring them together. Bringing them together is something that doesn't happen often enough, number one. And then number two, we get them together and we talk about, okay, here are the objectives. And we're not putting them out there for debate because management is responsible for setting them. But then we want to ask them, what are the barriers that you run into to meeting those kinds of objectives, to engage them and they're talking about their processes. And I find that 80 to 85% or even 90% of the folks, A, want to be involved in the solution, B, are appreciative that they're being engaged and that their thought process is being considered, and then C, that they're empowered to actually make changes that they come up with. And that's the communication process that's very difficult to maintain and sustain in many businesses, especially as large as they are. So thinking about that in terms of how that needs to be implemented over and over again and down through an organization is a key process that I think people can focus on. It's never-ending battle, but I think it's one that's worthwhile focusing on.
I love that. Such great advice, really getting people included. So what would you say has been your biggest success to date? Your proudest of?
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with sort of my mantra for my business. I'm not interested in making a living on a client. I want a client to make a living off of what I can teach them. So when I'm able to teach them either from my experiences as mistake or success, and I see them grasping that and not making the same mistake, I think that's the most enjoyable part of my work and my day.
Oh, I love that. There is nothing quite like, is there, seeing somebody else's success and knowing that you helped, however small that help was, but that you were able to help them to achieve that potential, to see that dream come to reality. Right. So what would you say on the flip side of that? What would you say has been your greatest lesson so far?
Well, one I actually sort of mentioned already, and that was to learn to listen longer. And then understanding the role of relationships. When I think about it, and I think about it in terms of respect, for me, that's one of the keys. And that's why I wrote the book, The Power of Respect in Business. That's where the title came from. And I think the biggest challenge for me was learning and understanding that myself and all of us are on an emotional scale all the time. It's part of our makeup. It's different for different people, clearly. And I'm not talking about a clinical emotional scale where we need therapy, although that's probably appropriate sometimes. I'm talking about a experiential scale that's sort of like when you feel you're in a good place, you're successful versus frustrating, up the ladder to anger, etc. And those kind of things that get in our way of being effective with other folks, even if we disagree. So the understanding and learning that there's an emotional scale there. And then for me, most importantly, learning what triggers my movement up and down that scale. And for me, that's where the word respect came from. Because as I'm listening to somebody or a group of people and either don't begin to not like what they're saying or don't agree with what they're saying, if I can in the next nanosecond, which is not always, say in my mind, how can I respect these people? It causes me to pause just long enough not to go up that emotional scale to frustration or anger or beyond, where now I'm completely ineffective and perhaps even causing conflict or worse in that process. And so it's not about being perfect, because none of us are going to be perfect at that. So to me, as I said, even in the book at the end, I said, if people could respect each other even 5% more of the time, just think how much better everyone would be. So it's not about perfection. It's about keeping on trying to find a way to manage our emotional scale to the benefit of ourselves and others.
I love that. And kind of obviously what you're doing in that, by putting that thought in there, is you're creating a moment of pause, aren't you, for yourself? You're interrupting that flow, because as human beings, we think that we are such great logical people. And yet the reality is we respond with our emotion first and our logic second, because our emotional brain actually responds 24 times faster than our non-emotional brain. So, whatever emotion has been triggered in us, whether it's a good one or a bad one, that will be driving often our response, what we're thinking about it. And I love that, such a simple piece. How can I be respectful? Just that trigger of kind of looking into, is there a different way? And one of the things I've been trying really hard to do is swap judgment for curiosity. So when I find myself going, well, I think that's wrong, I'm instead going, okay, interesting. I'd not thought of it that way. Can you tell me more? I might still think they're wrong at the end, but I'll have learned a little bit more along the way. And it's about, I guess, to your point, I think at our base, human beings want to be listened to, they want to be understood, and they want to be respected. And that doesn't mean you don't disagree, but you don't disrespect. You find a commonality that you can agree on, and then you agree to disagree on the bits that you can't, but that can be done respectfully. And the gentleman in your book sounds like he did that so eloquently, that actually created quite a persona for himself of being able to do just that ability to consciously not disrespect people, but still disagree and stay true to what you believe and your principles.
No, absolutely. And I think your suggestion is such a great one, saying, I haven't quite thought of it that way. Could you tell me more? It's interesting. That's the same concept, and it's very effective, because now you're talking about wanting to understand, as you say, what the other person's thinking. Again, not necessarily to agree with it or not, but to understand it. And I think the more we understand another person's point of view, especially when we disagree with it, the more we can possibly find the little nuggets in there that are actually a connection, that are actually a common ground within the concept. And therefore it makes the possibility of progress all the more possible. Everything's so polarized these days, certainly in our country here, certainly on the political level and other levels. We were passing by, there was a protest going on in a park, and then there was an opposition to that protest, and we were passing by, and small groups, 3 or 4 people on each side, were standing there inches from each other's faces, screaming at one another, and about their point of view. And I said to my daughter, who's 9 years old, I said, Madeline, I said, just remember, if everybody's screaming, nobody's listening. Yeah. And yet, there's valid points on both sides of that argument that was being made, but there's no way they're going to be heard. And there's ultimately a common ground within there that, again, no one will get to under those circumstances.
Oh, that's such great advice, and particularly to your children. It reminds me of a another book. It sounds like all I ever do all day is read books. I promise I do work as well. But it's called Crucial Conversations, and it talks about the fact that when there are moments in our life when conversations become crucial, and by that what we mean is there's some emotion that's involved, and either one or both parties is fearful of something, fearful of being made to be wrong, fearful of disagreement, fearful of being sold to, whatever it is, that there is some fear. And what happens is we respond with either violence or silence. So the violence piece is we get louder, we get angrier, we get more assertive in what we're saying. I always liken it to playing Pictionary with my best friend. If I don't get it the first time, she underlines it. I'm like, no, I can see it. Just don't know what it is. Underlining it is going to help me. I always get that picture of my mum when people are yelling, because they just think, well, you're just saying the same thing louder. That's not getting your point across.
Right.
But the alternative is silence. People just bury their head in the sand and walk away and hope it will disappear. And neither one of those works. But if you can work on where are the areas where we do agree, let's find some common ground. And now actually we're getting closer together. So the bit we disagree on, it's no longer we're in complete disagreement. We've now got an area that we can start to dig into to understand, is there a way through? What's important to you? What's important to me? How do we find that? But you're right, when we're just all yelling at each other, no one's listening and nothing's going to change apart from that pent-up anger that is now being fueled, isn't it, by that frustration of not getting your point across. And I mean, clearly at the moment with situations that we've got ongoing around the world, a lot of that is spilling out into real conflict. But you see examples of that, don't you, on a much smaller scale in organizations where they're not listening to each other, they're not seeking to understand, even if they are then still going to disagree, but at least they've got a better understanding of where the person's coming from, what's important to them, what they're trying to achieve.
No, absolutely. And related to that goes back to another element of answer to your question, areas that I've had to learn from and been challenging to me. And the other, that is, don't be afraid to be wrong. Because, the fear of being wrong can certainly drive us in a lot of directions, most of which aren't very good. It causes listening to shut down. It causes all kinds of things to happen. But the fact of the matter is, we're human beings, and being wrong is not a problem. Now, if the other person continually wants to punish you for being wrong, that's going to be an unfortunate situation. And obviously you may want to make a change. But the fact of the matter is, for your own self, knowing that you made a mistake and figuring out how to learn from it is much more rewarding than being afraid to confront that.
I love that. That is really great advice, because we do learn most often when we get something wrong. That's where we get our growth. I was chatting to somebody just yesterday about, I think it was Thomas Edison, who said, I didn't find one way to make a light bulb. I found 10,000 ways not to make the light bulb. But actually, he didn't let any one of those failures hold him back. He just kept going, okay, well, I still believe it can be done. So, if I keep going, I'm going to find the way. And I think that's kind of what we've got to do in life, isn't it? Is keep going, is look for the lesson, change direction ever so slightly. And I think sometimes people think it's got to be such a super swing from where I am to where I need to be. And actually, it's often just a millimeter shift, isn't it? It's that tiny little bit that needs to change in what we're doing that's going to have the biggest impact. Right. So if you could go back and give the younger Charlie some advice, what would it be?
It would be along those same lines of listen longer to make sure you understand, and not have to be so quick to come up with a solution or to have to be the one with the solution. And I think that, the whole idea of understanding that sometimes it's okay to eliminate what doesn't work through your mistakes, as you just described with the Edison, to get to where you need to go to. There was another lesson that I again learned much later. They do say youth is wasted on the young. Perhaps it is, but it is something Abraham Lincoln said. He said, "I don't like that man very much. I must get to know him better." And so that kind of concept would have benefited me sooner. And that's the whole basis for me trying to share things now. anything I can share that wasn't shared with me per se, and I don't mean that as a negative, it just didn't come across it. If that can help somebody learn sooner and be better, then by all means, I think that's the right purpose for life.
I love that. That is such great advice. And I'd forgotten that about Abraham Lincoln, but it's true, isn't it? When we see people and we immediately make a judgment, and yet once we get to know them, once we put a bit of time and effort in, we often find that they're not at all like we'd assumed, that the picture that we'd created in our mind that we weren't going to get on. Some of those people turn into people that become actually good friends because we were dealing with a misconception, weren't we? We don't respond to what's happening. We respond to what we've made it mean. It'll trigger something in our emotional state, as you so eloquently put earlier in today's show, that we'll be somewhere in that range of emotions, and often it will be something somebody said or did that just triggers something, reminds us of somebody that we didn't like, and therefore we badge them in there and go, I don't like this person either. Right. But if we get to know them better, we might find that, okay, well, actually we can get on really well.
Excuse me. Right. And you bring up another point when you talk about judgment. And again, I address this in the book as well, in a chapter called All Rise. And it's about the difference between judgment and being judgmental. And many times we're scolded or taught to feel bad about judgments we might make. We all make judgments, and we're entitled to make judgment. That does not make us bad people. When a judgment rises to the level of being judgmental, then it's when it crosses the line, and it can get into all kinds of issues of escalation, conflict, ineffectiveness, whatever the case may be. And that may be a hard thing for people to understand. The story I told in the book was actually about me. When we lived in Chicago, we lived on a quiet side street. And the lawn went right down to the curb, and the street was there. And there were stop signs at each end of our street. And so when cars would stop at the one side from the right, then they would step on the gas and speed up to the next stop sign and stop again. Well, one day in particular, I was thinking about it. My kids were playing down near the curb, and a car comes roaring past them at a high rate of speed that is actually a potential danger. The kids may walk out in the street, etc. And I thought to myself, my judgment of that person was, boy, that person's a jerk. And that's my judgment. Now, if I keep that to myself, I'm entitled to that, right, wrong, good, or bad. But if I then started yelling or screaming at them or making hand gestures at them, that becomes judgmental. And now it's gone to the point where it's completely inappropriate. Even if nothing else happens from the escalation, I've certainly set an example for other people that is totally inappropriate. So, and then beyond that could be even a confrontation or whatever that goes on past that. And so it's a slight difference, but we got to stop beating ourselves up for our judgments, but just caution ourselves not to take it to a judgmental level.
I love that. And that is such great advice, because we see it here. I mean, I live in Grantham, and it's a standing joke that you get to one of the roundabouts in our little town and everybody stops, and nobody has any ability to drive anymore. It's ridiculous. You just can't think, what happens? You can drive the rest of the time, but you get to this one roundabout, you've got no lane control. Everybody piles in. But you kind of, it's now become funny, and I find myself sitting there, and my little girl will be like, "Mummy, what's happening?" I'm like, "It's okay, Lovey. We're just waiting, because we'll wait patiently. We'll find our way through." But you see people getting really angry and really irate, and then it's like a pressure cooker of emotion. Because, as you say, it's not about owning that judgment. It's okay. It's okay that I think that nobody knows how to drive as soon as they hit this island, but I don't tell anybody that. I don't yell it out the window and go, seriously, get a driving instructor, because that isn't going to help anybody, and that's just going to fuel a fire. But it's such a great way of thinking about it, saying actually we're okay to make a judgment, but it's about, to your point, not turning that into being judgmental and then adding fuel to that fire. So I could chat to you all day, but can you believe our half an hour has nearly come to an end? It's absolutely flown through. But what I'd love to do is just share with our audience how they can get in touch with you and who you'd like to help.
Okay, great. So first of all, we we like to help companies because it not only helps the company itself, it helps the associates and probably the communities they work in. We do have a particular focus to family-owned businesses because through my career, I've come to learn the culture of change in a family-owned business, which is slightly different than public businesses. However, we're not exclusive in that regard if someone wants to reach out. The name of the company is Experts in How, LLC. Our website is expertsinhow.com. So you should be able to find us on the website. We're currently going to be revamping that, and you'll see more of a family business focus on it when we're done. You can reach me, quite frankly, directly on a cell phone in the U.S. at 847-867-1549. We also have a podcast called the Power of Respect Podcast, which is available on most any podcast channels if you'd like to take a listen. And if you're interested in being a guest, please reach out to me.
Oh, that's amazing. Charlie, it's a joy as always. I seriously suggest anybody listening to this goes and checks out that podcast. I had the absolute privilege of being on it, and I've listened to numerous episodes, and it's always full of insight. I will make sure that all of those details are in the show notes below. So if you didn't catch those fast enough, please just look in the show notes and you can reach out and get in touch with Charlie. Charlie, until next time, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.